Hey folks, today I'll cover something very special, and to start, let's go back in time. It's the year 2003, and PC gaming is preparing to enter the next revolutionary era. It's May, and a 13-year-old me has bought this monthly issue of his favorite magazine. The main article is the preview of the big game on the cover. The hype is already sky high, but there are also reviews of various games, and among these there was one that really struck me. Mistmare. The article talks about a fascinating RPG with an original setting and interesting mechanics, although not very well explained, as well as a strange save system and a low difficulty. We'll talk about this later. The final score is a decent 7, enough to pique my interest, and when, years later, I searched the internet for different opinions, this happened. What? Seriously, does it really suck that bad? Huh. Some reviews of this game are just catastrophic. I want to share this masterpiece with you from computer gaming world.
Let me put this as nicely as I possible can. Strategy First could have put a rotting dead rat in a shoebox and charged $20, and it would still have been a better value than Mistmare.
Dude, not even big rigs. Or this one from GameSpot.
Mistmare is more punishment than game, no matter what the box says. This isn't so much a fantasy role-playing game as it is a medieval torture device, right up there with the Rock and the Iron Maiden.
Beautiful. Apparently Mistmare had a problematic launch, and at the time these things were hardly forgivable, unlike today's times full of early access and continuous patches that are easily downloadable. No, at the time, if you came out badly, you were most likely ruined. So, my hype collapsed, but the fascination for this game has lasted until today, when I finally decided to play it with the necessary patches and fixes. And damn how surprised I was. The Dark Ages never ended. It's written on the cover and it's the premise of the whole game, which is set in an alternative 1996, in a world where the Industrial Revolution never took place. The world of Mistmare is dark and gritty, plagued by a deadly fog that has covered much of the northern European continent. This fog leads people into madness and brings to life nightmare creatures that kill everyone gruesomely. I must say that this premise reminds me a bit of Legend of Legaia, but... okay, let's not digress. We play as the young Monk Inquisitor Isador, a young man that as a child fell into contact with the fog, and since then he has had visions that are considered more of a stigma than a gift. At the start of a new game we are showed this message that summarizes the whole premise of the story, which is also repeated every time we reload the game, in case we forgot such important details. And then this cool FMV as the intro, that shows the abilities of the protagonist with his powerful stuff, which is quite odd because it's something introduced much later in the story. Whatever. In this first introductory chapter we'll follow Isador's training in Spain, where we'll learn about the basics. Since the beginning I understood all the reasons why this game was so pained. The interface is unintuitive, the controls are clunky, and the combat is this sort of real-time with pause, where all the stats of Isador and his enemies are calculated at each turn. At least it's what I understood. It's not really bad per se, but the first impression is... terrible. Anyway, we'll have to get familiar with the control scheme. I suggest you to stick immediately with the locked camera mod, which makes it similar to a classic action RPG, and when necessary we can still activate the free controls by holding down the wheel button and select what we want with the right one. Challenging the sergeant or other recruits in combat will advance the game time by a few hours each time, and the same happens if we interact with the mechanical warrior, or the shrine, which serve to increase some of our stats. See, Mistmare features a time management system. Many actions not related to the main quest will advance the game time, and we can see how much they require by hovering the cursor over the highlighted interactions. When a certain number of hours, which can total several in-game days, have passed, a time lock will occur. This will cause the secondary interactions to be grayed out, and a highlighted note will appear in the journal, indicating the mission that must be followed to advance the main storyline. Furthermore, in the following chapters set in various cities, the daily cycle will affect the places we can access, such as shops. A real audit of this game is the absence of game over. When Isador dies, we have to access the menu and choose to resurrect and restart from a specific location in the current chapter, which could be an inn or the beginning of a particular area. Besides, resurrecting doesn't incur any penalties, on the contrary will keep all the progress. In specific places like the arenas filled with nightmare creatures, we can decide to restart from the entrance and lower the average level of all enemies even multiple times, making everything extremely simple after several retries. Alternatively, we can choose to keep the average level of enemies at the cost of an extra game day, which is a strange choice, because simplifying things should have a cost, and not the other way around. Logically, right? By the way, this resurrecting mechanic reminded me of how immortality was managed in Planescape Torment, though Isador is a normal human. Perhaps gifted, but still a normal person. Continuing, we cannot save the game freely. Instead, the game automatically saves every time we enter an area, and if we do something unwanted like selling an important item or choosing the wrong dialogue option, we have to reload the list autosave. But if we leave that location, it will be overwritten, and there's no turning back. There's not even the possibility to return to the main menu. We are forced to select Save and Exit and return to the desktop, and upon reloading the game, we'll resume from where we left off. Now we should spend some words about the growth system, that is quite interesting. In short, in Mistmare we increase abilities and stats by using them, or by interacting with elements of the scenery, called building points, like the shrines and bells, or items from our inventory, like the weights. In the character sheet, we can see on the right the scheme containing the spheres of life: solar, lunar, and terrain. The column in the center indicates the affinity with them, on the left the focus, and on right the resistance. If we use the Shrine of Agility in the prologue, we'll see an improvement in lunar affinity and corporeal aspect. The more the affinity is, the more the corporeal points will be, and in this case will generate specifically more agility points. See, every sphere's affinity combined with corporeal or spiritual aspect generates specific attributes, and another example is ringing the Bells of Strength, which will improve with terrain affinity and corporeal aspect, that equals to more strength. If we press backspace, we'll access the reference chart that explains everything we need about the various bonuses of every ability and the spheres. Additionally, fighting high-level enemies like these nightmare creatures greatly improves the attributes. At a certain point in the story, battling these incredibly high-level beasts allows to quickly increase many stats and skills, especially if we exploit the AI limitations. Look at this big idiot. Anyway, combat in Mistmare is primarily melee, yes, but there's also a magic system called liturgical magic, patented by the Holy Church. During his time in Spain, Isador discovers to possess such talent, and thus is sent to Athens to train in magical arts. Magic in this game is full of potential, though it has a downside. It can drain the stamina limit quite fast, and that's a nuisance because it requires a lot of time to refill, unless you use expensive potions or have a high recovery rate. Aside that, there are two kinds of magic, which are called chords. The strikes, also known as offensive spells, and the harmonies, which are for self-enhancement. Spells can be launched in 3 different versions, with different effects. That is solar, lunar, and terrain, For example, purification in its terrain and lunar variations will increase strength and agility respectively, and solar increases the healing rate. Additionally, the magic effects stack, and for short periods will be freaking tanks, and the higher is the focus of the spheres, the greater will be the bonuses. During the whole game, I rarely tried to use offensive spells, and relied mainly on harmonies, which can be really powerful and useful. In the second half of the game, we'll acquire Twilight, whose lunar sphere will permit to teleport in any location of the map like a fast travel, and even where we are pointing the cursor during combat and exploration. It's a great game changer. Or better to say, breaker. If all these were not enough, during combat in melee we can even change the fighting style, depending from what we have learned and the weapon equipped. What changes essentially is the precision of the strikes, the power, and the stamina consumption, and this depends from the position of the fighting skulls in the slots. See, some styles can have different positions depending from the equipment, and thus have different effects. However, for almost the entire game I stuck with military, and the moveset of certain skulls is quite fun to watch, like Kung Fu. See? Cool moves. Fighting skulls can be learned by fighting certain NPCs, or simply by following the main quest, like the Arabic one, that is acquired during the tutorial. So far, Mistmare seems to be an amazing game because of all these ideas, and it's a real shame that all this was overlooked due to the disastrous launch. And believe me, there's much more to talk about, but first I'd like to focus on the story, before delving into other curious ideas and mechanics. So, after finishing the prologue/tutorial in Spain and Athens, Isador is sent to Rome as a new Inquisitor, and there he will work for important personalities of the Vatican and learn more about the world. Rome is just the first of the many cities that Isador will explore throughout the main quest, in which he can also undertake many subquests that often serve to delve deeper into the socio-political situation of the settlement. Just saying, Rome is clean and welcoming, yes, but behind this facade hides corrupt people, criminals on the loose, and the mafia. Yes, the fucking mafia in Rome in the alternate 1996. That's ludicrous. Aside from that, Isador will have the opportunity to meet a good variety of characters, some of them decided eccentric, and others very serious, who will assign him various missions. The game's quest design is fairly standard. They often involve going to a certain location where to retrieve an item, or find and kill a criminal or a beast, and then return to the assignee for the reward. Sometimes there's to wait a specific time in the daily cycle for a person to appear, or to be able to access a certain place. Other times, Isador is called upon to use one of his abilities to resolve something, such as healing magic, or disarm. In addition to all this, I have to say that overall the writing is quite clever, and occasionally some interesting outcomes can occur. What I immediately liked was Isador's characterization, which shows him to be a character with a certain depth, prone to showing himself to be both a smartass, a compassionate, and a man loyal to his duties and morals. From time to time, we'll also have to make moral choices that will affect the alignment, divided into the classics lawful, neutral and chaotic. Anyway, one of my favorite exchanges were with the crazy undertaker in Antwerp, where first the wacky chap will ask for extra wood to satisfy the Condin's request for coffins, but then will suddenly also ask about the extra nails that weren't mentioned before, to which Isador can reply very calmly, "And where do I get the bloody nails so I can make you impersonate Jesus?" It made me laugh. By the way, Isador's quest in Rome will take an unexpected turn. Some investigations will lead to the discovery that a sect of shady individuals called the Harvesters are plotting something occult against the Holy Church, and in particular a certain traitor will become his target to pursue and arrest, though he would prefer to kill him for personal reasons. All this along with the acquisition of a mysterious artifact weapon that later will have a huge role for the rest of the game. The Sharpness of Scythe. Thanks to this artifact, Isador will be able to pass through the deadly fog and fight the nightmare creatures. Thus begins his long journey throughout Europe, visiting cities like Avignon, Antwerp and Paris. Then he'll even discover that in North Europe, beyond the fog, there are still surviving civilizations like in Anglia, where the Catholic religion was replaced by the Druidic one. What really surprised me is that beyond Rome, the other settlements are still filled with a variable number of subquests that enrich the overall experience. Originally, I feared that all at the beginning there would be such things, as happens in other games that gradually get worse in secondary contents to concentrate only on the linear main quest. The overall main storyline of Mistmare is not too bad at all, and takes full advantage of its fascinating lore. There are some interesting twists in the endgame, although the very ending per se is decidedly rushed, but I tell you, I was expecting much worse. Instead, it was a very interesting experience, filled with many charismatic characters and good dialogues. Now, returning to the gameplay mechanics, I'll explain the most unusual one, but first let's point out that the game can be very difficult, and enemies often can kill Isador with just one hit, and there's need to get more powerful. How to do it, you ask? Simple. By fucking breaking the game. Look, in the menu we can select a chapter set in a city, and let's for example restart the prologue. Incredibly, we still have the same equipment and stats, except for the Sharpness of Scythe, for which we should replay the Avignon chapter to acquire it again. See, the game removes the artifact from the inventory if we restart one of the first 3 chapters. Anyway, the system permits to replay chapters of the game endlessly, so let's go to the Shrine of Agility, train with it until the time lock occurs, and then reload the chapter and redo everything again. We can do it even at the very start of the game. See, we can train endlessly with the shrines, the mechanical warriors, the bells, the books, etc. It's freaking cheap, I know, but listen, breaking the game is not just optional, it's fucking mandatory. It's like the devs did it on purpose. I've never seen anything like this. By the way, enemies still scale to our level, but will be enormously overpowered, and still enjoy the experience. Okay, I think you understood how everything works, so let's move to the other interesting mechanic introduced with the Sharpness of Scythe, that is, harvesting. This involves capturing nightmare creatures, imprisoning them in various crystals that can add some stats bonuses, and then freeing them to fight for us. This skill is showed in the introductory movie, and it's potentially very fun to use. A further proof of how full of ideas and passion the authors were, but I didn't use it much. Maybe I was too focused on killing and avoiding the beasts rather than capturing them. If I had to make a general consideration about Mistmare, I would define it as a prototype of the first The Witcher from 2007, as it shares many common elements, such as the succession of main hubs that act as a sort of open world. I know it may sound like bullshit, but the story structure, the presence of combat styles, the European dark fantasy setting, and other things seem very similar to me, and I do not rule out the possibility of other similar games from that period, and even earlier. Graphically speaking, the game is powered by the Jupiter version of the Elliptic engine, and with the patch 1.7, it's still full of bugs and glitches, like invisible obstacles that hinder exploration, the possibility of the game freezing after using the sleeping bag, both Isador and his enemies getting stuck during combat and thus becoming unable to attack, and so on. The good side is that the game never crashed to the desktop. At least that. Now, beyond the technical issues, visually the game isn't far behind 2003 standards, and I actually appreciated the polygonal models of many enemies, like the horrible nightmare creatures, and the visual effects of spells, but the animations in general are rather stiff, and the environments are often very empty, but all in all, I've seen worse. The sound compartment on the other end is pretty limited. The music tracks during gameplay sections are just a few, like one for each city, and two for the arenas. They're not bad to listen to, but they're very short and are repeated at intervals. The sound effects instead are quite terrible. I mean, they're very banal and don't make the fights exciting or the settlements feel alive. In general, there's always a continuous silence interrupted by Isador's loud footsteps. By the way, the game surprised me with its acceptable voice acting. Many important dialogues are dubbed, but strangely not entirely. Sometimes the dubbing doesn't fully cover certain messages, and feels very strange. That aside, I think that, with a few exceptions, the voice cast did a good job, especially for Isador.
Of Saint Cecile, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Every recruit has to pass 2 tests in our base.
Dear brothers, welcome to the elite school of liturgy. This camp was founded by the Holy Church as an educational institution where young men are taught to protect the Holy Church and its followers from evil.
Excuse me, but this room is already taken.
But how? I was sent here. You must have mistaken the numbers.
Me? I don't think so, Twerp. Go suck up to our mentor a little more. He might take you into his room.
Hey, what is wrong with you? Hello, I'm Brother Isador.
Stranger? Where did you come from?
I'm on a long journey, coming from a...
So, you're the one causing us so much trouble in the city. Well, too bad for you. You should never have come here, boy. Still, we cannot take the chance of you ruining it all for us, destroying our land of plenty and a chance to finally be someone.
What land of plenty?
This, our city of Antwerp.
At last we meet. You are younger than I expected, and more handsome, I must admit. Now tell me, what evil plans have you been evolving with the druids? Have you finally found a way to overthrow me?
Madam, I have no idea what you were talking about.
There is no need to pretend. I've got you now.
Now I think it's time to finish the review. I may not have covered some aspects of the game in depth, or pointed out some flaws, but I'm sure I've given you a general overview of Mistmare, of which to say, a truly unfortunate game. I'm firmly convinced that Arxel tribe, in collaboration with Sinister Systems, had good intentions and a lot of passion for this project, but unfortunately they went bankrupt, and we know the rest. Mistmare has fascinated me for far too long. I finally played it, and enjoyed it even with all its flaws. I'd call it my best recent guilty pleasure. See, despite its bugs, broken mechanics and general incompleteness, Mistmare has something special. I liked its world, the rule set, the writing and its overall story, of which I would have liked to see a less rushed ending. So, if you like old, unknown RPGs that deserve to be rediscovered, I'm sure Mistmare would be a must-play, and I hope the video was comprehensive. As always, a warm thanks to all viewers, and see you in the next entry.